started. I have bumped up the font of my slides because I have a lot of code. But in case someone is not able to read it very carefully, it's not very easy to read, then you can follow along in this slide. Okay, so let's get started. So this is what we have is once I run the test for ActiveRecord. So I am running the test for bundle exec rate test SQLite 3, and all the tests are passing. So this is good. What is the single most criteria for the test? One of the things is obviously it should pass, and the second thing is the test should be in the random order. How many of you do you think that the test actually ran in the random order? How many tests were run? 3,684, like 10,000 assertions. So the test, this is the code from active support test case. At the very top it says gem mini test, and it requires mini test. Mini test by default runs test in random order. And how do we know that? Because of this code from mini test. We have runnable methods, and we have random, parallel, and alpha, a few cases, and by default the test order is random. And in this case, the comments also says that by default it is random. So it should be random, right? This is the code also from test case mini test. Here what we are doing is we have a self._run, and then we have a big fix me. If you're not able to read it, so I took that code out and it's in a different slide. Fix me. MT5 is mini test 5. Runnable is not ordered. This is needed because we have test cross-class order-dependent bugs. So we have the so pay attention to the code which is highlighted in yellow. So we are overriding the run method of minitest 5, and we are sorting it by its name. So I want to see it in action. That is it for real? My tests are running in a particular deterministic order. So I opened up this class and just added one line. Suits.each, put s. And you will get a lot of class names, and I ran it a few times because I have to see it to believe it, and this is what I saw every single time. So yes, it is deterministic. So once again, zero error. I ran all the tests. So I said that, okay, so this is what they have by default. Let me change it just a slight. I'm just changing it to reverse. So I'm not making it random. I'm not making it non-deterministic. It is still 100% deterministic. It's just in a reverse order. And any guesses? Like how many guesses? In SQLite 3, 8 failures. PostgreSQL 25 failures. MySQL 2, 8 failures. So here I would ask, and this is the gist of the presentation. If you do nothing else, if you don't take away anything, is that help ActiveRecord. Help ActiveRecord, in spite of all the bad press and whatnot, is very widely used. And for a community like ours, Ruby community, where I personally believe we are obsessive, too much obsessive about the tests. We talk about how fast the test be, what should be the framework of choice, mini test, RSpec, what should be my infrastructure for running the test, should I write the test first or later? And after all the discussion in our community, we depend so much on ActiveRecord. And the test of ActiveRecord run in a deterministic order, which already, it uses a gem mini test, which says that by default it should be random, is not good. So next time somebody asks that how can I contribute to open source, you say you fix the random order thing. If you have free time, look into this thing. Because you're not changing the code, you're just changing the test. But I should tell you one more thing. It's going to be hard. It's hard for two reasons. Because when you run the test that is failing individually, it will pass every single time. How do I know? Because I have random. I have spent hours on fixing these things, and the other reason why it will be hard, because in the process I have fixed all the easy bugs. so the bugs which are left, I could not fix them in a deterministic amount of time. So yeah, it's going to be hard because the test itself is passing, it's dependent on some other test. So which test is causing what kind of problem, it is not easy to fix, but I think that for a community like ours, which is so much obsessed with tests, it is an eyesore, so we should try to fix it. So let's see. Do you see anything odd here? In my query, 45 is a string, and in the SQL, 45 is integer. It's either way you look at it, it's a magic. ActiveRecord is doing something which I did not expect it to be, but ActiveRecord is doing the right thing because it knows ID is integer. So this talk is about magical. I like magic, and this is exactly the kind of magic I like. You can call it too magical, less magical, wherever you are. This kind of magic is good because this is the right magic. ID is integer. If it's 45, it should become 45. Although in some cases, you can say that, okay, it should raise an error. So your mileage might vary, but this is exactly the current behavior right now. What happened here? User.where name is 10, and it knows, ActiveRecord knows that name is a string, and it did not turn that into a string. So this is not the kind of magic I like. So magic is good when it's doing the right thing, and which is in the first case, and it's consistent. Because when it's not consistent, it becomes one-off case, and then it is truly magical because you are doing magical thing in one-off case. So we should fix that. And by the way, this conversion from string to integer, this is actually is coming from array. But so I sent a pull request saying that this should be fixed. Most of the changes are in array, very minor changes in Rails. The core team member, they looked at it and they are like, nah. So it's still out there. You can check it out. It's 11138. Moving on. This is a standard has many case with has many true. Nothing special about it. And I have a physician.appointments.create, so which is a has many relation. It created an appointment record. Fine. This is how has many works. Here I'm creating physician.patients.create. So two records should be created, one for the patient and one for the joining table. Fine, it worked. In this case, what I did is that physician.patients.where clause, I put in a where clause. And then I did a create. You wouldn't do that in production. You should not. You should not be doing this in development too. But the point is that what happened here, it inserted a record. See, patients is a has many true case. So two records should be inserted, right? Or if you're not inserting, then just blow up or don't do anything. Inserting one zombie record is not, it's magical, but not a good magic. So let's see why it happened this way. It happened this way because we have physician.patients, which is a has-been relation, is a type of association relation, which is basically a subclass of relation. But patients, which is in the first case is a where, because the where clause it's a relation, while in the non-where clause it's a collection proxy. So what's happening is that when on a collection proxy you do a where clause, it should ideally return a collection proxy, but it's not returning a collection proxy, and it's returning a relation. So let's look at a relation. We do this kind of code all the time. Physician.all is not actually making a database call, it's just making a relation so that you can keep applying more conditions like where or order or any of those things. So same here, we are getting where class, it will keep returning a relation. And collection proxy is a subclass of relation which is holding a collection, and in order to hold the collection information, it has to know a lot about associations. So it also holds on to the association it is acting on. So for example, in this case, I did physician.class.patients instance variable get association, and that association is a has many through association. So collection proxy holds on to the association, and in this case it happens to be has many through association. It could be a has many association too. So right now we have two things, relation and collection proxy. But remember, when where clause is applied on collection proxy, it turns into a relation, which is not good, and we'll see the effect of it. This is once again the same query so that we can look at it while we are discussing the code. So this is the create method. I invoked the create method. This is the create method in relation. So pay attention here in the scoping. Scoping means that the default scope and all those things it takes care of. Class.create. So what's our class? Is patient. So that's why it creates a patient class. It inserts a single record. In the case of collection proxy, the create method is association.create. So the create method is invoked on has many through association, and that association knows all the things it needs to do to properly create that class, which in the case of has many through happens to be I need to insert a patient record and one joining record. So now we know the answer to our question, which is in the case of patients.where, up to patients is collection proxy, .where is returning a relation, and because of that relation, now we are inserting a single record and not double record. So to fix this problem, what we need to do is that collection proxy on where it ideally should remain a collection proxy. I did not submit any pull request for this thing. Anybody is welcome to do so. But anyway, the point was that hopefully you gain some understanding of like how the relation is and what is collection proxy and how do they interact with each other. Okay, this is a standard class which has two scopes, good and bad. So here we are using car.good.bad, and the SQL query is having only id is equal to 2. This is by the way Rails 3x. This is not the behavior in 4, and I'm going to talk about that. But if we do the other way around, car.bad.good is taking the good. So it seems like it's taking the last one, which is good, consistent, that the last where clause is winning. But what happens when we have where? Car.where id is 1, id is 2, and now I have both id 1 and 2. So this is not the kind of magic I like, because it's not consistent. So in the first two cases, what happened is that anytime you are applying scopes in Rails 3x, if you're acting on the same attribute, the last one wins. So anybody who has a code running in 3x, this is the behavior. And since people apply a scope and then do where clause very often, it would break down. So we had a lot of bugs related to this thing. And I kept thinking that, hey, this last one winning is not a good kind of magic, because we arbitrarily made this rule that, okay, the last one will win. But by that time, the Rails 4 beta 1 release was out. So of course it took a lot of bickering, a lot of confusion, a lot of cajoling to the team members saying that, okay, we should definitely fix this thing. And this is the right time to fix it, because Rails 4 has the opportunity to break things. It's a major version release. If we don't, then we are stuck with a minor version, and then we'll have a lot of issues. So let's break things. Like the last one will no longer win. So we sent a pull request and it was merged, so we are good. So this magic of last scope winning is gone from Rails 4. So that's one less magic and less to worry about. So moving on, we have a user thing here, and I want to talk about accept method. So here we have user.where clause and order, and then we have this method called accept. So accept will negate whatever you had previously applied. So this is Except is needed because let's say someone is giving you a relation and you don't have control over building this relation, but on this relation somehow you want to remove, say, order clause or something. In those cases you can use except. So it's good and it's working. Here I applied where and then I say except, I applied order and I say except order. So order is gone. Good, it works. I have default scope here, and in this case I did accept order, and here also accept worked. Fine. In this case, when I say accept where, this one is removing the where clause from the default scope. Good. This thing is working. Right. So I have a default scope here, and then I added a scope saying that I need to, for some reason my boss told me that don't worry about the people who are active or inactive. Everyone should get this email because of some regulatory issue. So what I need to do is that if I just send it out to people by default, it will only go to active people because that's my default scope. So somehow I need to negate the default scope so that this email goes out to everyone who signed up in this year 2013. So this is what I will do. A scope signed in 2013 except where and then my where clause. So that the first where clause, which is from the default scope, will be removed. You know where I'm going, right? In the SQL, we have our default scope. So that's not the good kind of magic. So what happened here? What happened here is the default scope by default is applied lazily at the very end. So what it means is that when I'm trying to do except, the default scope is not yet applied. So once my scope signed in 2013 has been applied, then the default scope comes and says, hey, let me apply my rule. And it applies its rule and we get the default scope condition in our where clause. And this behavior is there in Rails 4 because it's no longer in Rails Edge because it was removed. But so in the Rails Edge, you don't get this thing. So this is good. A Rails Edge meaning that it has not been backported to 4.0 as stable, so it will not be in 4.01 or 4.0. It will be in 4.1. So, but in the meantime, we have a problem here. I need to send out email to everyone who signed up in the year 2013. So one way I can do is unscoped. So unscoped removes all the scopes, and it's kind of magical because it also removes the scope which has yet to be applied in future. Really magical. Really magical. Because we agreed that, hey, it will be applied later, but it has already negated that. Okay. So the way unscoped works is that it has applied itself, and it marks that hey, unscoped has already been applied, so the default scope will not apply. So that's internally. So that's one way of fixing the problem. But the problem here with unscoped is that unscoped also removes all the scopes previously applied. So what let's say that I don't want to send out to everyone who is signed in 2013. What if I only want to send it out to people who signed in January? So I can apply some rules and then give it here, but unscoped will remove all those things. So that's not very good. So we have another trick. What we can do, build default scope. So if I call build default scope, that means I'm explicitly asking default scope that, hey, go ahead, apply yourself. And default scope keeps a track of it. So once it has applied itself, it will not reapply itself. So by forcing it to apply itself and then by doing except, we are removing it. So this will work in Rails 4. Okay.
Question: is there a side effect of doing the build before rather than the default behavior of doing it after?
By the question was that is there any side effect? There is no side effect. The only side effect is that, instead of being applied lazily at the very end, you are applying it beforehand. But I don't think so. And in Rails Edge, anyway, this is the first thing applied. So that is the changed behavior in Rails Edge right now. Okay, moving on. Here we have a standard model. The user has many posts. And we do something like user.preload to it. So we don't use preload very often. What we usually do is that usually we join or we use include. So here I'm going to show how include underneath works. So preload is one of the tools. Preload always loads the association data in two different queries. And that's how include works by default. By default, include will make two different queries. So it does nothing else but just applies preload behind the scene. But in case you need for any reason, there is no reason, you cannot use preload yourself. You can use it directly. The problem with preload is that since it always makes two queries, in your where clause, you cannot use the data from post. So this query will fail because the table post is not available, while in the where clause you can do users.name and this will work. We also have eager load. So eager load always loads the data in a single query, and it uses left outer join. That's it. I mean, there's nothing magical. It just loads the data in a single query using left outer join. And now we are coming to the include, which is what is used most often. So includes by default makes two different queries, but now we know that behind the scene it is calling preload, right? But unlike preload, here we can force include to load the data in a single query instead of two queries. So we can use reference as post. In the previous version, Rails 3x and other things, it used to look into the query inside and try to figure it out, but that became very, very brittle part of the code. So now you have to explicitly specify references, and it does the left outer join. Yeah, so in this case, you don't need to do references. You can do where and the where post.name, and it detects that, oh, okay, post is being used. So let's switch from preload to eager load using left outer join. So that's the thing about includes. And this is just for the completeness, is the last case, user.joins post. So in the case of joins, it does the inner join. Okay? So nothing magical. We are creating a user record and we get a user record. Then we do user.post.create and we create a post record. Fine. Now something is happening. We are accessing the first record from the post, and we are accessing it from the memory directly, and we are changing the name. So we are basically making the first record from the associated records dirty. Okay? And I do user.save. I thought the user has many posts means that user keeps track of its post. It does not. Or at least it does not by default. As you can see, the query here, user.save, did not do anything. So your post name change is not yet applied. But we have a solution for that, and it has been there for a while. Autosave. So first let's see how autosave works. If we apply this option autosave true, then if we do user.save, it saves the record. So this is a good trick, right? So the question is, why, when would you not want to do this, the default behavior? Why shouldn't in the first case autosave true is the default? Because when I'm saying user has many posts, I want this kind of behavior to come by default. So it feels like, because, well, once again, this is a magical code for me. I mean, it's wonderful. I just say autosave true. First of all, autosave throws me off. I mean, what does autosave mean? Like, do I really need to type save, or it should automatically save it? But yeah, besides that, it's magical. It works wonderfully. But then, why in the first case, it's not doing this magic? Same thing can happen on the belongs to also. Like in the post belongs to user, and I'm changing the name of the user through post. post.user.name. And then I do post.save. If autosave is true, then this thing will happen. I skip the part where besides autosave. So autosave is doing the right thing here. So why autosave is not being applied directly? I don't know. I'm going to ask them. Seriously. But I think there is some reasoning behind it. I don't know. I haven't had time to look into it. But to me, it seems like autosave should be the default, and it's one of those features which is very useful, but I don't see used very often. But maybe because you don't change the memory records the way I'm showing the case here, so there has not been much need for it. But it can be useful in, okay, so let's first go through this caveat. So in the case of autosave, I have autosave, and then I have a requirement that anytime the username is saved, I want hello dot, the name should be saved with salutation. So that's easy enough. I can do before save, add salutation, and when I run that query, it will not work. The reason why it will not work is this is one of the very few cases where I should have my callback before save, before the declaration. So let's stop here. In the Rails 2 world and even in the Rails 3, some of the iterations, you should always define all your association has many belongs to at the top, and after that you call back. Like after create, before create, all those things. Because what happens is that those has many things, they are themselves implemented as a callback. And callbacks run in the order in which they are defined. So if you define your callback after the has many callback, then when you're running before save, then you'll have access to that object. But if you put your callback first, it will create all sorts of problems, and it used to create a lot more problems in 2x and certain areas of 3x too. But in Rails 4, it has been cleaned up a lot. Now, it's no longer that much of a problem, but still, I would recommend that you put your callbacks after the association definition. This is one of the few cases where, in order to make it work, you need to define before save first, and the reason for that is autosave works by having before save. So if autosave before save is first and your before save is after, then it will not have access to that thing. So you need to have your before save first so that you can change the name from John to hello John, and then before save of the autosave will execute and it will save hello John. So this is the thing about the callback. Okay, and the last example with autosave. So here I have has many post, and I have added a validation for post. I said that presence is true. So I create my post. I set post.name no, so that the validation will kick in. And then I say post.valid. So obviously the post is not valid. And this time I'm not doing any kind of memory manipulation. So this is not that post 0 kind of thing. This is what you might do it for real, in the real world. So post.valid is false, which is good. But post belongs to user, and the user is valid. User is valid is true. Not the right kind of magic. So let's apply autosave. If you have autosave, then we can go through the same exercise, and post is still invalid, but now user.valid is false too. So autosave seems like a useful tool to me. So here we have a user, we get the object ID of the user, and then we do user.post.first.user.object ID. So we are trying to do a round trip. From the user we got all the posts, from the post we got the first post, and then ask the first post, because of belongs to, give me a user. And we get a user object, but it's a different user object. So the first user object and the second user object, they are two different user objects. In some cases, it can create problems. And the true solution for this thing is the true identity mapping project, which Rails have taken up a year back, and some of the very smart people worked on it for months, but because of certain reason, it could not be put into master. So we don't have a true identity mapping in ActiveRecord. But in the meantime, we have a few small tools available, and one of them is InverseOf. So this is in Rails 4. Even if you don't apply InverseOf, you don't do anything. In Rails Edge, you will get the right value. You see the object ID is same. This is the kind of magic I like. I didn't even have to apply anything. I didn't even have to say autosave true. I didn't even have to say InverseOf, nothing. You just fire up your Rails 4.1 code, and this code will magically start working. So how is this thing happening? So this thing is happening because of InverseOf. In Rails 4 world, you can apply the option InverseOf, and the code will start working like this thing in Rails 4 world, but you still need to apply InverseOf. So how it will start working in Rails 4.1 without me doing anything? That's because InverseOf is auto-derived in Rails 4.1. Awesome. This is exactly the right kind of magic I like. Because this is the desired behavior. Why not apply it from the beginning perfectly? So in the Rails Edge, they solve this problem. If you do not set the InverseOf, and if you don't want InverseOf, you have to explicitly go and say InverseOf false. Makes sense. For some reason, if you don't want, but otherwise by default, they'll apply it. Good. I love it. However, associations that contain the following options will not have their inverse set automatically. So I have a code running in Rails 4.1 which has user has many posts, and lo and behold, if my code is relying on that behavior of InverseOf for that identity, for that object, a user object to be same, if tomorrow I apply a condition, this automatic derivation of InverseOf will stop working. No warning, nothing. It will just stop working. And you would be wondering that, dude, I just changed the foreign key something. Or I changed the I don't know what's happening. And you will find a bug, which will be good. But the thing is that what I'm trying to get at is that magic has a boundary. I mean, magic is not free. I looked at the pull request, I saw all the work being done because it's extremely hard to satisfy all these conditions. So Rails is trying to do the right thing. To the extent possible, it's trying to push you in the right direction, but there are certain cases where the magic will stop working. So we all need to educate ourselves about what's magic, what's not magic, and the true magic is magic is still good. It's just that we need to understand. And to the extent Rails can keep pushing the boundary of magic, like automatically setting InverseOf, which if you have never used InverseOf before, you don't need to worry about it, because previously it was not doing the right thing. I mean, previously it was doing what it was doing, but it was asking you to do InverseOf. Now it's doing the right thing. So which is exactly in line with the philosophy DHS laid out much earlier, like remove trivial choices. So by default, InverseOf seems like the right idea. Hey, guess what? 70% of the cases we can apply that. Let's go ahead and apply it. So that's the magic there. User.do.save, nothing new. But when I look at the method save, I think that, okay, so in the ActiveRecord base, there must be a method called save, right? That's how I say user.new.save. There has to be a method. And actually, the save method is there, but it's not at one single module. It's not at one single place. It's at 4 different places. I said, wow, that's something. I mean, it's a 4 save method, how does it work? So this is, we have ActiveRecord base, and we have 4 modules included. So let's go through all of the modules very quickly. The first one is persistence, which has a save method, create or update. The second, create and update does what the name says, it creates a record, updates a record. The second module is validations, it performs the validations unless you have said validate false. Makes sense. The third one is save method, which does attribute method check. It takes care of dirty, marking the flags dirty or not. And the fourth one is in transactions, which wraps the whole thing in a transaction and goes back and it does the transaction management. Fine. So let's look at this thing again. So what happens is that, and we know that the modules, they are executed in the reverse order of inclusion. So once you start your save method, the transaction, opens up the transaction, puts everything in a transaction block, then attributes, does the dirty checking, then validations, makes sure it's validate or not, and if everything goes fine, then persistent fires, and actually the record is saved. So to me, this is a very good example of how module can be used to break up the code. We all know, like in the Ruby world, like module is used to break up the code and to bring behavior. But this is a great example where a single behavior save, if it had been put into one single file, one single method, it would have been very, very difficult to manage. So single method, but it has distinct functionalities. They have been broken into its own modules, but under the same method name. It's fantastic. I mean, to me, it was a little bit like I learned a lot about this code. So nothing magical here. I just learned things, so I wanted to share it with you. Yeah, so this is once again for the completeness. This is the life cycle, entering transactions, attribute, validation, persistence, and then it's leaving in the same order. Okay, so I have 4 minutes left, and this is a little bit, the last one I saved it because it's a little bit tricky. So let me try to go through it. I will try to rush things a little bit. And which is unfortunate because this is probably the most complicated piece of code also. So we'll see. So here we have a comment which belongs to a post. Author has many comments, and post belongs to author and has many comments. A standard model. But look at our query. Comment.joins post. Okay, so we are joining comment and post, that's fine. And then dot merge. Post.joins author, and that is merging into merge author.where name is Joe. So pay attention to the yellow closing parentheses because we are merging that thing into this thing. If you execute in Rails 3.2, it will say association name author was not found. The reason why it says the association name author was not found because the inside block post.joins author, which is being merged into author.whereJoe, it has been combined into a single relation which has very little information about the way it has merged and saved the value. It just saves joins values. I'm going to show it to you. So here we are doing post.joins author.merge author.where, and the join values is just the author. But other than that, all this information is lost. So it's not like we have another from clause, another tables, or where we are maintaining it. So when we are trying to merge, it's saying that I know I'm rushing through this thing. This is a little bit, it needs more time to go through it. But and similarly, we have joins values and then we have where values, so which is over there. Fine. Now, so that is the problem in that. So in the case of Rails 3x, it's failing because once the inner block is joined, it is just a relation, and that has join values and where values, and not much to handle the incoming request properly. In the case of Rails 4, what happens is that the same values, if you look at the join values, which I'm storing it in a variable called j, look at j.first is post. So it has 3, that is an array which has 3 components, j.first, post, which was same as 3.2, j.second, it's an empty array, but j.third, which came into picture only in Rails 4. Because of this j.third, which is an ActiveRecord association join dependency join association. So this join association, it is holding the information about the merge which just took place. So now this is holding information about itself, the class, the association, the table, and everything. And once we, so I sent a pull request, it was merged, and it's fixed. But I just wanted to look at the code and see this thing that what you see here in this 3 lines is a very, very complicated piece of code inside is going. And it was not working in 3x, but it's working in 4x. But in return, what you get is that there is no hand building the code. You can apply the scopes here. I didn't talk about the merging the scopes. So if I looked at some code in, I think it was in Discourse or something, and they had some comments that this thing is not being supported. But that could be because they might be using Rails 3.2. And it might be generally broken. But in the Rails 4 world, now you can really push the boundary. If you are hand ruling the SQL, and I'm not saying that there is no room for it, but I'm saying that the Rails is much more accommodating to your things and try to push the boundary. That's it. Thank you.